The bathroom was quiet, too quiet. A single light bulb hung faintly above the mirror, its weak glow spreading across cracked tiles and a sink stained with toothpaste marks. The silence was broken only by the slow drip of a leaking faucet, each drop hitting porcelain with a hollow tap. In the center of it all stood a boy, 15 years old, lean, pale, and restless. He leaned closer to the mirror, his breath fogging the glass, his focus locked on the left side of his face. There, swelling beneath his skin, sat a pimple that had grown far beyond what anyone would consider normal. It wasn't small, it wasn't harmless. The thing bulged outward like a blister ready to burst, its surface stretched thin and angry red, pulsing faintly in time with his heartbeat. It almost seemed alive. For weeks, he had ignored it. He'd told himself it was nothing, just part of being a teenager. But every day it grew larger, tighter, and harder to hide. Tonight, he had reached his breaking point. He couldn't stand to look at it anymore. He raised his hand. His fingers trembled. He pressed them against the swollen flesh. At first, only pain. Sharp, stabbing, radiating across his cheek like fire. His jaw tightened as he bore down harder, pressing with all his strength. His knuckles turned white. His eyes watered. And then, crack. The skin split. But what burst out was not the creamy pus of a clogged pore. No, what spilled down his cheek was a thick, gray-black liquid, foul-smelling and heavy. The stench was metallic, rotting, unbearable. He gagged, clutching the sink for balance as the ooze dripped onto porcelain in sticky strings. He fumbled for tissues, wiping frantically, but the nightmare had only begun. Something moved beneath his skin. A ripple, a shift, as though something inside was pushing back, desperate to be free. His chest tightened. His breathing quickened. He pressed again, harder than before, desperate to purge it. The swelling burst wider, tearing open like rotten fruit. And from the wound, forcing its way out, came something solid. Not pus, not liquid, but a mass, dark, rubbery, horrifyingly out of place. He froze, staring at his reflection. His own face had become a stranger's, bloodied, streaked with black ooze, his mouth trembling, eyes wide in horror. He tried to scream, but the sound caught in his throat. Only a dry, broken gasp escaped. The smell filled the room, thick and nauseating. He stumbled back, knocking over a bottle of mouthwash. It shattered on the floor, the sound shattering the suffocating silence. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his face, tissues falling from his hands like wilted leaves. His shirt was stained, his fingers slick with blood and oil, but none of it mattered. The truth was undeniable now. This wasn't just a pimple. This was an infection. Something had been living beneath his skin, growing, waiting. By the time his parents reached the door, drawn by the crash, they found him curled on the tiles, shivering, his face torn open. The mirror reflected the truth. He couldn't speak. And what doctors would soon uncover inside his cheek was so grotesque, so unthinkable, that even the most hardened professionals were left frozen in disbelief. So now ask yourself, is there something you've been carrying too long, hidden beneath the surface? Something ignored, something left to fester until it consumes you? Maybe it's pain, maybe it's regret, maybe it's someone you've never forgiven, or someone you've never allowed to forgive you. Perhaps this story is the sign you needed to finally let it go. If you'd like to hear more stories like this of resilience, redemption, and the human spirit, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow this channel. His name was Daniel, 15 years old, born in a quiet suburban town where life moved slowly, where neighbors still greeted one another from their porches, and where children biked down cracked sidewalks without fear. Daniel wasn't the loudest kid, nor was he the most popular. He wasn't the star of the football team, nor the class clown that everyone remembered. He was the boy who blended in, the boy who laughed softly at jokes in the back row, the boy who always seemed to be watching the world more than speaking to it. He had a gentle nature. His mother often said he was an old soul trapped in a young body. He loved sketching, filling notebooks with drawings of birds, cars, and sometimes strange shapes that even he couldn't explain. He had a small circle of friends, boys who shared his love for video games and late-night bike rides through quiet streets. At home, life was simple. His father worked long hours at a factory on the edge of town. His mother managed a bakery, rising at dawn every morning, dusted in flour by the time most families were waking up. Daniel had one younger sister, Emily, just 10, with a laugh so bright it could lift the weight from even the heaviest of days. Their home was modest, a 2-bedroom house with peeling paint, a yard cluttered with toys, and a squeaky swing set his father had promised to fix but never quite got around to. But it was filled with warmth, meals eaten together, weekend board games, his mother humming while she cooked, his father telling tired jokes over the clatter of cutlery. For all his quietness, Daniel carried a hidden self-consciousness. Like many his age, he worried about his appearance. He would linger in front of the mirror longer than he admitted, flattening his unruly hair, pulling at his clothes, tracing the small imperfections on his skin. A stray freckle, a crooked smile, and now that blemish on his cheek. It started small, so small he could cover it with a fingertip. At first he dismissed it. A pimple, nothing more. His mother told him it was normal, part of growing up. His friends teased him lightly, laughing about battle scars of puberty. Daniel laughed too, but inside it gnawed at him. Every morning, when he leaned close to the bathroom mirror, it was the first thing he saw. Every photograph, every glance at his reflection in a shop window, it loomed larger, and slowly, over days, it grew. It wasn't just about the swelling. It was about what it made him feel. Exposed, vulnerable, as though everyone's eyes were drawn to that one imperfection on his face. At school, he tugged his hoodie higher. At home, he avoided family photos. Sometimes, late at night, he traced his fingers around it, wondering why it felt so different. But life went on. He still rode his bike with his friends, still sketched in his notebook, still played hide-and-seek with Emily in the yard. To anyone looking in, Daniel was an ordinary boy living an ordinary life. And yet, beneath the surface, something was beginning to stir. Looking back, his mother would remember small moments she dismissed at the time. The way Daniel sometimes winced when chewing, pressing a hand lightly against his cheek. The way he grew quieter at dinner, picking at his food. The way his drawings became darker, stranger, shapes twisting into shadows that didn't resemble the animals and cars he once loved to sketch. But she brushed it off. She thought he was just growing, just changing, just becoming a teenager. No one suspected what was happening. No one imagined that what seemed like an ordinary blemish could be the doorway to something far more sinister. In the heart of that small, ordinary town, Daniel's story was about to take a turn that would shake everyone who knew him. At first, Daniel thought little of it. A pimple was a pimple, nothing more. He'd seen his classmates complain about theirs, swapping stories of creams and cleansers, laughing about whose skin would betray them next. But Daniel's blemish didn't fade. By the second week, he noticed it had changed. The skin around it wasn't just red anymore. It was hot to the touch, swollen as though something beneath was pushing outward. Sometimes it itched. Other times, it throbbed in rhythm with his heartbeat, a deep, pulsing ache that seemed to reach into his jaw. One night, as he brushed his teeth, he leaned closer to the mirror. Under the harsh bathroom light, the spot didn't look like any normal pimple. The surface stretched too thin, the edges ringed in a faint purple bruise. He tilted his head, touched it gently, and flinched. The pressure sent a shock of pain across his face. Still, he said nothing. At school, when his friends pointed out, "Whoa, Dan, that thing's huge," one of them laughed. He forced a smile, pulling his hoodie tighter around his face. It was easier to pretend it didn't matter. Easier to laugh along than admit the truth. That every day it hurt more. Meals became uncomfortable. He found himself chewing slower, favoring the right side of his mouth. His mother asked if he had a toothache. He shook his head quickly, brushing her off. He didn't want her to worry, didn't want the spotlight on him. But the nights were the worst. Lying in bed, he would feel it, throbbing, swelling, almost humming beneath his skin. Sometimes he swore he felt a ripple, a tiny shift, as if something inside was moving. He'd jolt upright, heart pounding, then laugh at himself. "You're imagining it. It's nothing. just a stupid pimple. Yet when he pressed his pillow against his cheek for relief, he swore the pain spread, seeping into his jaw, into his ear, until even sleep became a battle. By the third week, Emily noticed. His little sister tilted her head one evening at dinner, her fork hovering in midair. "Why is your face all puffy?" she asked innocently. Daniel froze, heat rushing to his cheeks. His mother frowned, leaning closer. "It's just a spot," Daniel muttered quickly, shoving another forkful of food into his mouth, though it hurt to chew. "Don't make a big deal about it." His father grunted something about boys toughening up and went back to his meal. The conversation moved on, but his mother's eyes lingered. The following day, Daniel skipped a basketball game with his friends, telling them he was tired. The truth was, he didn't want anyone to see him up close. The swelling seemed bigger, the throbbing sharper. He avoided mirrors now, except when necessary. At night, though, curiosity won. He found himself back in the bathroom, staring at the reflection he dreaded. The pimple glistened under the light, larger than ever. He leaned in close, fingertips brushing the taut skin, and for the first time, he felt it twitch. He jerked back instantly, heart hammering, breath caught in his throat. His stomach churned. He told himself it was just his imagination, a muscle spasm, nerves, nothing more. But deep down, fear had planted itself, because pimples don't twitch. Days turned into weeks, and what began as a blemish had become something impossible to ignore. The swelling on Daniel's cheek no longer looked like a pimple. It had expanded. The skin stretched so tightly that it glistened under the light. The one small bump now formed a hard, raised mound, round and angry, with faint veins spidering outward beneath the skin. Every morning, he hoped it might shrink. Every night, he went to bed praying it would fade. Instead, it only grew. The pain was constant now. Not sharp, not fleeting, deep gnawing, as though something buried inside was pushing relentlessly against bone and flesh. Sometimes, the ache spread into his jaw, making it hard to chew. Other times, it throbbed up toward his temple, leaving him dizzy. At dinner, his fork lingered on his plate more often than not. His mother noticed how he pushed food around rather than eating. His father asked if he was sick. Daniel shook his head each time, forcing a smile, insisting he was fine. But he wasn't fine. At school, the whispers began. His classmates noticed a bulge. Some laughed. Some stared. One boy muttered under his breath, "Looks like an alien's about to crawl out." The words stung deeper than he let on. He pulled his hoodie tighter, ducked his head lower, kept to the shadows in the hallways. His friends tried to make light of it. "Dude, just pop it already." But Daniel knew this was no ordinary pimple. The thought of pressing on it made him shudder. The one time he had tried, the pain had nearly brought tears to his eyes. At night, the true horror revealed itself. He would lie awake, the side of his face pressed against the pillow, and feel it shift, not just pulse with his heartbeat, not just ache, move, a subtle quiver, a ripple under his skin, as though something inside was alive. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, but the sensation grew more distinct, more undeniable, until even touching it filled him with revulsion. One evening, his little sister Emily burst into tears at the dinner table. "Why does his face look like that?" she sobbed, pointing at her brother. Daniel's cheeks burned hotter than fire. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor, and stormed off to his room. Behind the slammed door, he sat on his bed, clutching his face, heart racing. He wasn't angry at Emily. She was too young to understand. But he couldn't escape the truth anymore. His own family was beginning to fear what they saw. His mother knocked gently later that night. "Honey, maybe we should have a doctor look at it." "No." He snapped, sharper than he intended. He pulled the blanket over his head, as though hiding could erase the growing nightmare. But even as he spoke, he knew she was right. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Still, pride and fear held him back. Pride, because he didn't want to admit weakness. Fear, because deep down he knew this wasn't just acne. This was something else entirely. The swelling reached its peak one late evening when Daniel caught his reflection in the mirror. His cheek was grotesquely distorted now. The skin stretched to its breaking point. He leaned closer, gripping the sink, breathing hard. His face no longer looked like his own. It looked invaded, and with every throb of pain, the truth pressed harder against him. He couldn't ignore it much longer. Please subscribe now. Your one click is equal to my biggest motivation. The night it finally became unbearable began like any other. Daniel had retreated to his room after dinner. Hoodie pulled tight, sketchbook open but untouched on his desk. His pencil lay idle in his hand as he stared at the page. Normally, drawing was his escape, the one place where the noise of the world dimmed. But tonight, the pain was louder than anything else. The swelling in his cheek had reached a grotesque size. The skin bulged outward, stretched so tight it looked like it might split if he so much as smiled. The area had darkened, a sickly mix of red and purple. When he brushed his fingers over it lightly, the heat made him flinch. But it wasn't just the pain. It was the movement. Every few minutes, the lump quivered beneath the skin, a subtle twitch that sent a shiver down his spine. The sensation crawled through him like icy fingers, and he clenched his jaw until it ached. He wanted to scream, to claw it out, to make it stop, but the fear of what he might find kept him paralyzed. By midnight, the throbbing had grown unbearable. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't think. He sat curled on the edge of his bed, clutching his face, rocking slightly as the hours dragged on. When his mother peeked in to check on him, she froze in the doorway. The sight of her son's distorted cheek stole the breath from her lungs. "Daniel!" Her voice cracked. "We're going to the hospital. Now!" He shook his head violently, muffled protest spilling out between clenched teeth. "No, I'm fine. It's just a spot. It'll go away." But the lie was paper-thin, and they both knew it. Moments later, his father appeared, bleary-eyed but stern. One look at Daniel, and his jaw tightened. "Get in the car." Daniel tried to resist, but his body betrayed him. When he stood, his legs wobbled beneath him. His vision blurred at the edges. The pain spiked, a blinding wave that left him gasping. His father caught his arm, steadying him, while his mother grabbed a jacket and car keys. Emily, awakened by the commotion, peeked from the hallway, her wide eyes filled with tears at the sight of her brother. "What's happening to him?" she whispered. No one answered. The drive to the hospital was a blur of headlights and silence. Daniel pressed a crumpled tissue against his cheek, as though he could hold himself together with sheer will. His reflection in the car window stared back at him, pale, sweating, and unrecognizable. By the time they reached the emergency room, Daniel's body felt heavy, drained. His parents rushed him inside, voices urgent, while nurses swarmed around him. He was lowered onto a gurney, harsh fluorescent lights glaring above. Questions flew through the air, but Daniel barely heard them. "What happened? How long has this been growing? Any fever? Headaches? Trouble eating?" His mother answered as best she could, her voice trembling. Daniel lay still, staring upward, trying to block out the rising tide of panic. The doctor arrived quickly, pulling on gloves as he leaned over the boy. His brow furrowed the moment he saw the swelling. He pressed gently against the mound. Daniel winced, a cry escaping his throat. "This isn't ordinary," the doctor muttered, almost to himself. His eyes met the parents'. "We need to investigate immediately." Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. The doctor's tone was calm, controlled, but his expression betrayed something else. Unease. The boy was wheeled down a hallway, the world passing in blurs of white walls and rushing footsteps. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled his nose. His mother clutched his hand, whispering, "You'll be okay. Just stay strong." But Daniel couldn't shake the terror gnawing at him, because deep inside, beneath the fear and the pain, a darker truth pressed harder against his thoughts. He wasn't sure he wanted to know what was inside him. As the gurney rolled into the examination room, the lights flared brighter. Instruments gleamed on a tray. A nurse adjusted a monitor. The doctor pulled up a stool, his gloved hand steady, his eyes sharp with focus. "All right," the doctor said softly. "Let's see what we're dealing with." He reached for a scalpel, and in that suspended moment, Daniel realized that whatever was about to be revealed was far worse than anything he had ever imagined. The room was silent, except for the rhythmic beep of the monitor and the faint hiss of oxygen flowing through a tube. Daniel lay on the narrow examination table, trembling, his face bathed in the harsh glow of fluorescent lights. His mother stood near his head, clutching his hand, while his father hovered just behind, his jaw set tight. The doctor leaned closer, his expression unreadable as he studied the grotesque bulge in Daniel's cheek. He tapped lightly against the swollen flesh. The tissue quivered beneath his glove, almost like it was alive. Daniel's breath hitched. His nails dug into the side of the bed. "We're going to numb the area first," the doctor explained gently. "Then I'll make a small incision. Nothing to be afraid of." But Daniel was afraid, terrified. The cold sting of anesthesia seeped into his skin, a prick and then a spreading numbness. His chest rose and fell rapidly, each inhale shallow, each exhale shaky. He shut his eyes, willing himself to disappear. The scalpel gleamed under the light. With one steady motion, the doctor pressed the blade against the swollen flesh and drew a line. A thin stream of dark, foul-smelling liquid burst out instantly, splattering onto the gauze pad. The stench was overwhelming, rotting, sour, metallic. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances but kept working, blotting the mess, handing tools swiftly. Daniel gagged, bile rising in his throat. His mother pressed a hand against her mouth, eyes wide with horror. But then, something else happened. The wound twitched. The doctor frowned, leaning closer. He widened the incision carefully. And what emerged was not what anyone in that room had expected. A thick, writhing mass pushed outward, slick and glistening. It wasn't just pus or infection. It moved with its own unsettling rhythm, as though something alive had been trapped beneath the skin. The nurse nearest the bed gasped and stepped back. Daniel cried out, trying to turn his head away, but the doctor steadied him. "Hold him still," the doctor ordered firmly. With a careful grip, he reached in with forceps and tugged. The mass resisted at first, clinging tightly to the tissue inside, and then with a sickening tear it slid free. The room fell into stunned silence. Resting in the doctor's gloved hands was a lump of tissue unlike anything they had ever seen. Long strands of hair were matted across its surface, twisted together with cartilage-like ridges and fragments that looked disturbingly like tiny teeth. Daniel's mother staggered back against the wall, her knees threatening to give way. His father muttered under his breath, his face pale. What is that?" his mother whispered, her voice cracking. The doctor swallowed hard, a professional mask wavering for the first time. He placed the mass into a stainless steel tray, where it sat glistening, grotesque under the light. "This," he said slowly, "appears to be a type of tumor, more specifically a teratoma." The word hung in the air, unfamiliar yet heavy with meaning. He continued, his tone clinical but tinged with awe. "It's a rare growth that sometimes contains human tissue, hair, teeth, even bone. Essentially, it's as if part of twin or embryonic tissue has developed abnormally inside the body." Daniel's eyes widened, tears spilling down his cheeks. His voice cracked as he whispered, "You mean I had something living in me?" The doctor shook his head quickly. "Not living, exactly, but growing, feeding on you, and if it hadn't been removed, it could have continued to expand, causing even more damage." The nurses exchanged horrified looks, whispering among themselves. The tray with the tumor seemed to pulse in the corner of the room, its twisted strands of hair clinging to the metal. Daniel's mother finally broke down, sobbing into her hands. His father wrapped an arm around her, though his own face betrayed the shock he tried to hide. The boy lay frozen, unable to process the nightmare that had just been pulled from his body. The doctor spoke again, his tone gentler now. "You're going to need more tests, Daniel. We have to make sure nothing else like this is forming. But for now, the worst of it is out. You're safe." Safe. The word echoed in Daniel's head, but it didn't feel real. How could he feel safe knowing that something so monstrous had been living inside him, feeding, waiting, hidden beneath the surface for years? The rest of the night blurred into a haze. Nurses cleaned the wound, stitched the incision, and bandaged his face. His parents stayed by his side, whispering reassurances he could barely hear. When the doctor finally left the room, the stainless steel tray was carried out with him. But even after it was gone, the image lingered in everyone's mind. The strand of hair, the jagged tooth-like fragments, the grotesque reminder of what had been growing inside a boy who only wanted to live a normal life. Daniel lay awake long after the room had quieted. The monitors beeped softly, steady and calm, but inside his chest his heart raced. He couldn't escape the thought. If it had been left any longer, would it have killed him? And worse, was there more inside him that they hadn't yet found? The room was quiet again, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, where the air feels heavy, thick with something you can't name. Daniel sat upright in the hospital bed, his cheek bandaged, his body weak. The antiseptic smell clung to everything, the sheets, the air, even his own skin. But worse than the smell was a memory, replaying over and over in his mind. The cut, the gush of blackened liquid, the way the doctor had pulled that thing out of him. His stomach churned every time the image surfaced. The strands of hair, the teeth, the grotesque reminder that something so unnatural had been growing inside him. He turned his head away from a tray of untouched food at his bedside. The thought of eating made him nauseous. His mother sat in the corner, her face pale, her hands twisting the strap of her purse over and over again. She hadn't spoken much since the surgery, only murmured prayers under her breath. His father stood near the window, arms crossed, staring out at the hospital parking lot as though it held the answers he couldn't find in here. Daniel finally broke the silence. His voice was hoarse, quiet. "Why me?" The question hung in the air. His mother looked up, startled, but couldn't find the words. His father's jaw clenched, the muscles in his face tightening as if he wanted to be strong, to protect, but had no shield against the weight of what his son had endured. Daniel pressed his palms into his eyes. Other kids get colds. They break their arms. They don't. His voice cracked. They don't grow monsters inside them. His mother rushed to his side, clutching his hand. "Don't say that," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "You're not a monster. You're my son, my beautiful boy." But Daniel shook his head. He couldn't believe her. Not yet. Every time he blinked, he saw it again, that twisted lump, the way it writhed when it was pulled from him, the way the nurses gasped, the way his parents' faces had twisted in horror. He wasn't just scared. He was ashamed. That night, when the hospital finally quieted and his parents dozed in the chairs beside his bed, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind wouldn't stop racing. Would people at school find out? Would they look at him differently? Would they whisper about the boy who carried something unnatural in his face? He imagined their laughter, their disgust. He imagined the word spreading. Freak. His chest tightened, his throat burned. He curled into himself, clutching his pillow like a lifeline, but nothing could stop the wave of dread that pressed down on him. Sleep finally came, but it was cruel. In his dreams, he was back in the examination room. The doctor leaned over him, scalpel in hand. But when the incision was made, the tumor didn't come out. It kept growing, spreading, pushing through his cheek, his neck, his chest. Hair and teeth sprouted through his skin as his parents screamed. The nurses ran. The doctor dropped his tools. Daniel awoke with a scream, sweat soaking his bandages, his heart hammering like it wanted to escape. His mother was at his side instantly, stroking his hair, whispering soothing words, but he couldn't stop trembling. He couldn't stop seeing it. The doctors had removed the physical growth. Yes, but inside him, something else was festering, a wound invisible to scalpels and stitches. Shame, fear, the crushing weight of being different. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, Daniel sat staring at his reflection in the small hospital mirror. The bandage covered most of his cheek, but he could still see the swelling, the bruises, the pale face of a boy who no longer recognized himself. He touched the bandage lightly, his fingers trembling. "What if it comes back?" he whispered. No one had an answer, not even the doctor, because sometimes the deepest scars aren't left on the skin. They're carved into the soul. The days that follow blurred together. Morning rounds, medication, the quiet shuffle of nurses' shoes in the hallway. Daniel marked time not by hours, but by the change of sunlight spilling through the hospital blinds. At first, every glance at his reflection sent a jolt of dread through him. The swelling, the bandages, the reminder of what had been inside. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. The mirror didn't just show him a scar. It showed him survival. Each time the bandages were changed, he braced himself. The wound was raw, red, and imperfect, but it was also healing. One afternoon, his doctor visited with cautious optimism. "You're doing well," he said, flipping through the chart. "No signs of infection. No regrowth. You're stronger than you think, Daniel. Stronger than you think." The words lingered, echoing in his mind long after the doctor left. Daniel realized that maybe the horror wasn't the whole story. Maybe the thing inside him wasn't just a curse. Maybe it was proof that he had endured something few could imagine, and he had survived it. His parents noticed a change, too. Instead of tears, his mother began smiling more when she entered the room. His father, usually so stoic, even cracked a joke about Daniel's stubborn refusal to eat hospital food. For the first time in weeks, laughter returned to the room, light and fragile, but real. At night, the nightmares still came, but he began facing them differently. When the dream monster grew inside his face, he reminded himself it was gone now. When the whispers of freak filled his ears, he reminded himself he was still here. Slowly, Daniel discovered a kind of resilience he didn't know he had. On the 7th morning, a nurse wheeled him to the garden outside. The sunlight was warm, the air smelled of flowers, and for the first time since that terrifying night, he felt alive in a way that words couldn't capture. He touched his cheek lightly, and instead of shame, he felt gratitude. Yes, the scar would remain. Yes, he would always remember what happened. But scars weren't just marks of pain. They were proof of battles fought and won. Daniel closed his eyes, breathing deeply, letting the warmth soak into him. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be whispers, stares, maybe even cruelty from those who didn't understand. But he also knew something else. He was more than his fear, more than the growth that once lived inside him, more than the scar on his face. He was a survivor. And sometimes survival itself is the most powerful story of all. Stories like Daniel's remind us of something we often forget. Life is unpredictable. One moment, everything feels normal. The next, a single choice, a single squeeze of a pimple, a single moment of pain can change everything. But buried inside the horror of his story is a truth that matters for all of us. We don't choose what life throws at us, but we do choose how we face it. Scars, whether on the body or the heart, are not marks of shame. They are proof of survival, proof that you endured something that could have broken you. And yet, here you are, still standing. Daniel's story is about a hidden parasite, yes. But beneath the science, the medicine, the surgeries, it's about something much bigger. It's about courage, about the ability to confront what terrifies us, about the way a person can walk through their darkest moment and emerge with a new kind of strength. And perhaps the most important lesson of all, you are never truly alone. Behind every fear, there are people ready to help. Behind every scar, there's a story waiting to inspire. So if you are carrying something inside, something heavy, painful, or hidden from the world, remember this. Your scars are not weaknesses. They are chapters in your story. And maybe, just maybe, the very thing you fear will one day become the proof of your resilience. Because sometimes the ugliest wounds give rise to the most powerful strength. The image of Daniel sitting in that hospital bed will never leave the memory of those who saw him. His cheek wrapped in bandages, his eyes tired but alive, his breathing steady at last. He was not the same boy who had once stood in front of a mirror, desperate to fix what he thought was a simple blemish. He had walked through fire, and had come out on the other side. Scarred, yes, but stronger in ways no one could see. When he was finally discharged from the hospital, stepping into the sunlight felt like stepping into a new life. The air was sweeter, the colors brighter, the sound of his mother's voice more comforting than ever before. Every sensation, every ordinary detail of the world now felt extraordinary, because when you've come so close to losing everything, You begin to see how much every small moment matters. Daniel didn't walk out as just a survivor of a rare parasite. He walked out as a symbol of something greater, resilience. His scar became a reminder that the body heals, the soul learns, and the heart endures. But scars are never just about the past. They are about the future, too. Because each scar whispers a question. What will you do with the life you've been given back? Daniel chose to share his story. He chose to let others know that what looks small, what seems insignificant, can sometimes hide a danger we cannot imagine. And in telling it, he gave others permission to open up about their own hidden battles, the things festering under the surface, whether physical wounds or silent pains of the heart. Maybe his story is about a parasite, but maybe it's also about something more universal, the way we carry things inside us for too long. Pain, regret, resentment, fear. We think it's small, harmless, something we can ignore. But left untreated, it grows, it spreads, until one day, it explodes in ways we never saw coming. That is the true power of Daniel's journey. It isn't just a cautionary tale about health. It is a mirror held up to every single one of us. So if you're listening right now, ask yourself, what are you carrying inside? What wound are you ignoring, hoping it will disappear on its own? Is it a grudge you've held for years? A memory you've buried deep? A conversation you've avoided because it feels too painful? The lesson Daniel's story leaves us with is this. Don't wait. Don't let what's hidden inside consume you. Seek help. Speak out. Heal. Because sometimes what feels like the smallest pimple on your heart can become the deepest scar of your life, if left unresolved. And yet, there is hope. Always hope. Because scars are not endings. They are beginnings. They mean you've survived. They mean you've endured. They mean you are still here, with the chance to turn pain into strength, fear into courage, silence into a voice. Daniel's cheek may forever carry the mark of what happened, but to him, it is no longer a curse. It is a reminder of the day he discovered just how strong he truly was. And that strength, dear viewer, lives in you as well. So as this story closes, carry this with you. Your scars are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you fought, and you won. And if Daniel's story has touched you, reminded you of your own resilience, or given you the courage to face what you've been avoiding, then let that spark become action. Because life is too short to stay silent, too short to ignore the pain, too short not to heal. If you'd like to hear more stories like this of resilience, redemption, and the human spirit, don't forget to subscribe, and follow this channel.